for one reason or another, these players are actually terrifying for us to draft in fantasy football. And I mean, we're really scared to do it. And we've gone through and done a couple of mock drafts. We've done some best ball drafts. So we've kind of gotten our feet wet with how we're going to be drafting this year. And when we got down to it, guys like Jahmyr Gibbs were guys we were avoiding. And this one really started when we were actually making our top 12 rankings. When we were doing that, we were comparing them. Nathan and I both realized that we had Jahmyr Gibbs quite a bit lower than everybody else. And so we started looking into like why. Because at first it was kind of a gut thing. And then I realized last year when you're looking at Jahmyr Gibbs' production, which as a rookie, by the way, Jahmyr Gibbs was excellent. Jahmyr Gibbs, from a receiving standpoint, was everything you wanted him to be and more. He had 11 total touchdowns last year. Jahmyr Gibbs was 8th in fantasy points per game last year. He had 5.2 yards per carry. He had almost 1,000 rushing yards. He had 52 receptions. He had 316 receiving yards. Now, this is great. Jahmyr Gibbs, from an opportunity standpoint, last year was 18th in the league in snap share, and that's sharing that backfield with David Montgomery. He was 34th in opportunity share. He was 7th in team run plays per game. He was 28th in carries. He was 8th in targets. And so when you're looking at the opportunity, especially when you're considering how much money the Lions paid David Montgomery and how much you expected them to share that backfield, the opportunity there was not bad. And so with Jahmyr Gibbs, him being 8th in the league in points per game at 16.1 points per game. That's really good. Him being a running back one last year, a low-end running back one when you're counting for the whole season, that's pretty good for Jahmyr Gibbs. We're very happy about that. And last year he was a really good pick at ADP last year. The problem remains that last year Jahmyr Gibbs was going where? 4th, 5th round, right? I mean, he was a guy going there. You picked him there. He had 16 points per game as a rookie, and you're like, yes, this is awesome. However, this year where you're looking at Jahmyr Gibbs is going, there are some fantasy drafts, yes, where Jahmyr Gibbs is climbing up into the end of the first round. He is being drafted as the running back 4 behind CMC, Bijan, Brees, and then there's Jahmyr Gibbs. And when you're looking at what he's able to do last year, he was the running back 10 PPR league. And again, the opportunity was fairly good. Here are the questions we have to ask ourselves with Jahmyr Gibbs, because maybe you're comfortable drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, and I wouldn't necessarily blame you if you are. Jahmyr Gibbs as a receiving talent gives you a really high floor in fantasy football. I do think he's somewhat of a safe pick. I do think Brees in the same range is a better pick by quite a lot, but that being said, some of you may be comfortable drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, and I understand why, because the receiving usage is there. He got plenty of red zone usage later in the season after not getting a ton in the beginning of the season, and although David Montgomery did produce, it didn't really prohibit Jahmyr Gibbs from producing as well. All of those are good things. The problem is when you're looking at running back 8 from points per game basis, running back 10 overall last year, what are the odds that Jahmyr Gibbs, when he really is sharing a backfield with David Montgomery, and yes, every running back shares a backfield, but with Jahmyr Gibbs, it's a little bit different because David Montgomery is getting a ton of carries and a ton of touches in the red zone. What are the odds that Jahmyr Gibbs actually gets enough opportunity to go like top 5 running back this year? In a year where you have some stronger running backs, you have Bijan Robinson with a better offensive coordinator. That's a huge thing. Christian McCaffrey's the same. Brees Hall will still be a top 5 running back. But then you've got the fringe guys. Kyron Williams being slept on could still be a top 5 running back this year. Jonathan Taylor, he's looking pretty good as well, and he's going to be playing alongside Anthony Richardson. Saquon Barkley in the best situation of his life. What are the odds that Jahmyr Gibbs actually outperforms that ADP? In our opinion, it's kind of slim.
Yeah, and honestly, I just think it's funny that like even though both of us believe that Jahmyr Gibbs is not necessarily going to be constantly hurt by David Montgomery. I think he was in stretches last year, even after that, first half of the season when he was, a fresh rookie. And with Montgomery, the one thing that drove us up the wall that we even saw at the end of the season was Jahmyr Gibbs would get a lot of carries and opportunities between the 20s, and then once he got into the red zone, they took him out, and Montgomery came in. Yeah. Now, it was nice to see both of them on the field at times in the red zone, but again, like even when it was all said and done, Jahmyr Gibbs still ended up being 15th in the league in red zone opportunities, only 6 at the goal line. So, I mean, you're looking at that being like those opportunities with the touchdowns that you ended up getting is very good. It shows you how explosive and talented he can be. But like you said, all those running backs that you mentioned, there's just, in my opinion, better, even safer shots with the carries that they're going to be getting on a consistent basis.
I think so too. And I'm going to let you take the next one because this is actually a Nathan thing. Because I don't know how I feel about this. We're going to do some discussioning today.
Yeah, so this will be good discussioning. I'm not too worried about my take here because we've never really seen in recent years rookie wide receivers go in the range that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going. And almost for that reason alone, I am just straight up scared to take Marvin the first round. Like we have seen, and we've done a lot of historical data with fantasy and found that really the higher you take a rookie in your fantasy draft, the more likely you are to kind of be screwed. And historically speaking, the shots that you're taking on rookie wide receivers, rookie running backs in the later rounds, like 7th, 8th, or beyond, the more likely you are to get a value premium or a production premium out of those guys. Because like case in point, last year, Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Jahmyr Gibbs as a rookie, again, going 4th round. We just talked about him, and he was going at that price because he was a rookie running back, and he paid off because he outproduced expectations. At the wide receiver position, it's a lot tougher because generally your best prospects coming into the league every single year are still, they still have tempered expectations, right? They're going, 4th or 5th rounds. You just saw that with JSN last year with Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, kind of all of them going in the same area for the most part. And what ended up happening, the ones that you took the highest, like JSN and QJ, ended up busting, and the ones that you took at a more significant discount ended up being the ones that were better shots. And to me, like, what is the big difference here? Marvin Harrison Jr. is light years better as a prospect than any of these guys that we've seen in previous years, really since Jamar Chase. But I am not sold enough to take him as a guaranteed bona fide. I'm 100% confident that he's going to be a wide receiver 1 this year. If he's a mid wide receiver 2, which is very good for an NFL rookie wide receiver, that would pretty much insinuate that he's going to get like well over 1,000 receiving yards as a mid wide receiver 2. Probably, I mean, we've seen a lot of wide receivers that are in that 12 to 24 range or 13 to 24 range that get well over 130 targets, and they still ended up not producing. Like, a lot of this is going to be, how much do you think he's going to be utilized in the red zone as well? Is he going to be an option in the red zone compared to a Trey McBride, compared to a James Conner or a Trey Benson, compared to, I mean, even some of the other receivers in that offense like a Michael Wilson? I'm not necessarily sold on being so confident that I'm going to take him in the first round, and that's just where I'm at right now. Why not take a shot on a guy who, in my opinion, has a much higher floor in a proven veteran like A.J. Brown, like Garrett Wilson, who just got 170 targets last year in a horrible offense, and even a couple guys that are going after him, like the running backs.
And so my thing with Marv is, like, I do think that it's been a while since we've had a rookie go this high in these drafts. But when you're talking about like who you're actually sure is going to be a wide receiver 1 this year, I think you can safely say the top 7 guys. Most people would argue only 6, but we would say Puka Nacua as well. And so like CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, A.J. Brown, and Puka are the guys who are like, yeah, they're probably going to be wide receiver 1s this year. And then after that, you're really not sure if Garrett Wilson, you're really not sure if Drake London or Chris Olave or Ayuk or Adams or Collins or Waddle. I mean, there's going to be some combination of those guys. Maybe even a guy down the list like Stephon Diggs or Cooper Kupp sneaks up there into the top 12. But really, you only have just over half of the wide receiver 1s where you can say, yeah, I'm pretty confident if all goes well, they're going to be wide receiver 1s. And so with Marv, I think that, yes, normally taking a rookie this high in fantasy drafts carries quite a bit of risk. With Marvin Harrison Jr., like, I think there's a very realistic world where he gets 140 targets this year. If Marvin Harrison Jr. does get that, I mean, let's look at Garrett Wilson's rookie year, 147 targets and 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, it ended him at 12.5 fantasy points per game, which was 30th in the league. But the main thing there is that he only had 83 receptions on those 150 targets. I mean, that's extremely low. And so the reason for that, obviously, with Garrett Wilson was that his quarterback play was extremely poor. And I think the big difference here, I can see Marvin Harrison Jr. getting a similar amount of targets on a Cardinals offense where you've got Trey McBride, who is going to get a lot of targets and a lot of production. But then outside of Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr., it's like, kind of pick your favorite. A lot of people are talking about Greg Dortch right now. Greg Dortch could be somebody who gets a fair amount of targets from the slot. Michael Wilson's a guy we really like if he stays healthy. But even outside of that, like, I still think the targets are going to be highly concentrated in Arizona. When you're talking about the skill set that he has, especially being a dominant X, I think that he can get 150 targets and have 6 touchdowns. And then if he brings in 100 or plus of those targets, then you're talking about him being a top 12 wide receiver pretty easily. Like, I don't think the path for him to be a wide receiver 1 is all that unrealistic this year, especially as a rookie. I think that, yes, normally I would agree that taking rookies this high is a bad idea. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., I lean towards being the exception. Now, with that being said, and I don't want to just sit on a fence here, but like, if Marvin Harrison Jr. was a low-end wide receiver 2 or mid wide receiver 2, would that surprise me? Absolutely not. He's a rookie. Yeah. I just think if there were ever a talent to actually overcome that, I think it would be
the
Marv.
big thing there is going to be the red zone usage, which is a little bit unknown, I think. Yeah. And when you're looking at the guys that did go 13 to 24, I pulled it up last year, the target variance. You've got obviously Pittman right there at wide receiver 13. He gets 160. He's definitely the outlier there. Ayuk gets 105. Debo, a rushing and a receiving threat, gets 90. Then you got 140 with Olave, 140 with Thielen, 140 with Ridley, 112 with Devonta Smith, very safe. Amari Cooper, 130. DK, 120. D-Hop, 140. Jordan Addison, 108. Jacoby Myers, 108. So it's a mix there, but you definitely see a lot of people favoring like upwards of 130 to 140 targets on the high end that are still going in that range. And a lot of it is, like I already said, just where's he going to get his usage? And again, they drafted him top 5. They drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. top 5. So you'd assume he gets usage everywhere. But this year, with the rushing upside of Kyler Murray, with Trey McBride being a more experienced veteran and breaking out insanely last year, and you now have 2 really, really good running backs in Trey Benson and James Conner, I just wonder. I just wonder how slowly they're going to ease Marv into his dominant alpha role that we know he has the upside for, but it just scares me in 2024.
I think if you're talking about taking him or AJ Brown, you take AJ Brown. Him or Puka, you take Puka.
Yep.
But then when it gets past that, like Drake London's never done it. Chris Olave's never done it. Garrett Wilson's never done it. Ayuk has done it, but is he going to do it again? Devontae Adams is obviously a guy that's done it. Nico has done it now. Waddle has done it technically. Debo has done it. So well,
those guys, I mean, that's a full round gap once you get to those guys at the ends, because there's a bunch of running backs going in that range between. And this is like we did a whole video. This is the year of the running back. Marvin Harrison Jr. going at the tail end of the first, beginning of the second is kind of the reason why I'd rather take a shot on a running back in the early rounds.
I don't actually blame you for that, but the next guy on this list is going to be Chris Olave. And Chris Olave is a guy that it's not that I won't draft him, because I will draft Chris Olave this year, at least some of him. It's not that I think you shouldn't draft him, because I think you probably should draft some Chris Olave, especially if what people are saying about the New Orleans Saints and that offense is correct. Because a lot of people who know the situation even better than I do would say, okay, that situation's getting better. You have them actually making improvements now, and you have that offense moving in the right direction. This could look pretty different. The reason I'm scared, I'll do it, but I'm scared to do it because I'm terrified of the situation. I could see it all blowing up in New Orleans this year. I could see it being an absolute 100% crap show and things just completely hitting a wall this year. Now, let's talk about Chris Olave and the good parts of it. He was 12th in targets last year, right? As a second-year player, that's really good. He was 6th in air yards, and he was also 3rd in unrealized air yards. So you're leaving a lot of opportunity there to be desired, with Derek Carr being the most mid quarterback of all time, most likely.
I was going to say, those unrealized air yards aren't going to get any better with the same quarterback in the same offense.
I love a guy, though, that you see his versatility. He was 4th in the league in deep targets last year, and he was 12th overall in targets. So he's a guy that's getting intermediate range targets, that's going to get you a lot of receptions, potentially. Again, the problem with him being 138 targets last year and only caught 87 of them. And again, this is usually indicative of quarterback play. And that's what scares me with Chris Olave, is the quarterback play. I don't trust Derek Carr. There are some parts of Derek Carr I'm like, wow, he's actually really good there. And then there are other parts of Derek Carr where I'm like, whew, he's not good there at all. And when you watch him, I mean, he cried after that game one time, so there's that. But no, I'm not really shorting him for that. But I'm just scared of that situation. And if you're a Saints fan, or if you know the NFC South and you want to say, yeah, Avery, look, you have no reason to be scared. You should be taking Chris Olave at wide receiver 11 prices. That's fine. But again, Chris Olave, in terms of where he's finished in points per game, has never finished higher than wide receiver 19 in points per game. So you would need to see Chris Olave do one of two things. A, increase his receptions, which means Derek Carr's play would have to be better, or B, get more receiving touchdowns. When you're talking about him as a red zone threat also, he was 33rd in the league in red zone targets last year. So that's really not his style. When Chris Olave does produce, you're going to see him, A, get a lot of big play touchdowns, or B, catch a lot of intermediate receptions that are going to really bring up his reception total and therefore bring up his points. I think those are the two ways that Chris Olave produces. Do either of those things happen next year? Maybe, but am I confident of that? I'm curious if you are, because I'm not confident of that.
No, I'm not confident at all. I'm very, very, very unconfident. That's for sure. And with Chris Olave, for me, it's like, why would I take a shot on him in the second round when I can take a shot on Calvin Ridley, who's getting the same amount of targets and the same amount of yardage and more touchdown opportunity because of how he's utilized in the red zone in a situation that has more in my opinion, passing upside. Probably the same amount of risk this year because of the wild card at quarterback, but more upside because of what Will Levis is capable of doing, throwing the ball downfield consistently, which is something that Carr just doesn't do. He adores his checkdowns. That's why we love Alvin Kamara as a value so much this year, and why we even think that Kendra Miller isn't a terrible sleeper, because they're going to be using those running backs in the red zone. Like, do you know? Have you seen the stats with Derek Carr and like his red zone efficiency? No. And how it's like it's literally like one of the worst in the history of ever.
That doesn't surprise me at all. But
because once you like shrink the field for him, everyone knows where the ball's going, because he already does checkdowns all the time. And then when you don't have like your field stretcher and Shaheed that can do anything once you get inside the 20-yard line, you know exactly what he's going to do.
All right, well, let's test your theory then real quick.
Yeah.
Because you're right. In terms of efficiency, looking at his accuracy rating, he's 26th in the league. True completion percentage, 4th in the league. Deep ball completion percentage, 14th. Pressured completion percentage, 6th. Play action completion percentage, 2nd. Red zone completion percentage, 19th in the league. All right, let's go to accuracy, right?
Yeah. The reason he's top 5 in so many of those is because the only shots he doesn't take any shots.
That's true. Yeah,
because he's the definition of a mid-game manager.
I mean, pressured catchable pass rate, 10th in the league, 17th in deep ball catchable pass rate, 37th in the league in red zone accuracy rating. 37th. That's all of the quarterbacks in the league plus 5 backups.
Yes.
So that's what and look, again, Chris Olave is not going to be a big red zone reception guy anyways. So you just have to see, again, the increase in production for Chris Olave to finish as a wide receiver 1 and to justify drafting him at wide receiver 11. It has to come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And looking across the board, it's hard to figure out where that's really going to come from this year. But I do hope he does. And honestly, I'm still going to be drafting Chris Olave because I believe in the talent so much. And sometimes I just do have to draft the talent that I believe in. But it's probably a long shot for him.
I mean, people believed in the talent of DJ Moore for 5 years, and they were always right about the talent, and it just never worked out.
Yeah,
because the situation was so bad.
Yeah.
And for me, in fantasy football, I'm just trying to be realistic with the situation, and there are about 16 other situations in the league that I like better than in the New Orleans
I don't blame
Saints.
you. I don't blame you. So.
Actually, a lot more than 16.
Yeah.
But
all right.
Yeah, next guy we're going to have here is multiple guys. We're going to put them all in a cluster, and there's a reason that we're putting them all together. It's any Bears wide receiver. It's Rome Odunze, it's Keenan Allen, it's DJ Moore. Yes, DJ Moore, the guy who was the wide receiver 6, I think, in total points last year, who did that with Justin Fields, who is, if you didn't believe it then, you know it now, an inferior passer to Caleb Williams.
Yes, he is.
Before Caleb Williams has even stepped on the field, we know it. That's why they let him go. That's why they drafted Caleb Williams. The passing opportunity in Chicago is going to be a lot greater than it has been for quite a while. I mean, dating all the way back to the Jay Cutler days. Like, those were the most passing volume, passing upside opportunity days that you've seen in a while for Chicago. It's going to be higher. It's going to be higher this year. So why, domain guys, would you ever say that you want to avoid every single Bears wide receiver? It is for this one simple reason. We don't know who it's going to be.
They're all good.
They're all good, and they're all, honestly, this year probably going to take away from each other. Keenan Allen, a phenomenal wide receiver who doesn't age for some reason and is able to be productive in one of the worst situations that we've seen in a while in the Chargers offense. Wide receiver 1 last year. DJ Moore, wide receiver 1 last year in a horrible situation. Rome Odunze, an amazing wide receiver prospect that was drafted top 10 in the NFL draft, specifically to be paired with Caleb Williams. You tell me who's going to be productive. I mean, we just spent an entire segment on Marvin Harrison Jr. saying how I don't trust taking a rookie wide receiver that high, and the same kind of applies to Rome Odunze and even his price at the moment. I'd rather take a guy who's priced lower. But at the same time, does that mean that I don't think Rome Odunze is going to be able to get a significant amount of volume and take away from DJ Moore and or Keenan Allen? Absolutely not. I definitely think that he is capable as a talent to be able to do that for sure. With DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, it's a 50-50 shot. And they're both going like they're a wide receiver 1s. Case in point, Michael Pittman, right? Michael Pittman at price going very, very close to these other 2 guys who are competing with each other to be the wide receiver 1. And you know without a question that Michael Pittman's going to be the wide receiver 1 in the Colts offense and that he's going to get a floor of 140 targets. You're hoping that one of these wide receivers is going to get that volume this year.
Right. I mean, they're all good. Rome Odunze, I think, is underrated. And he's being drafted, I think when you're looking at ADP, he's being drafted lower than Keenan Allen, lower than, gosh dang it, DJ Moore. My freaking brain stopped. And I think Rome, like, you could, if you went and told me, like, hey, this year, DJ Moore is going to be the wide receiver one of the Bears, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. He was the wide receiver one last year. Or if you told me, like, hey, look, Keenan Allen's going to be the wide receiver one on the Bears, I'd be like, yeah, that's all right.
Last hurrah.
And if you tell me, like, okay, guys, like, Rome Odunze is the wide receiver one of the Bears, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, he got drafted with Caleb Williams. He's really good. He's a top 10 talent.
He's the future for the Bears.
So it's not that I'm avoiding this offense in those wide receivers because I don't like it, because I think the Bears offense is going to be significantly better. Yep. It's because when you're talking about the risk versus the reward of drafting a player, I mean, let's look at their prices right now. DJ Moore, wide receiver 21. Keenan Allen, wide receiver 33. Rome Odunze, wide receiver 38. So none of them are being drafted as top 20 wide receivers, which I think it's good, it's smart. But do you even want to take the chance on one of those? One of them, I mean, the odds of all of them being top 36 wide receivers are extremely slim. We've only seen it a handful of times in the recent 5-6 years.
You have a 1 in 3 chance of getting a really, really nice value with one of those guys.
And those odds are fairly low.
Which one of them is going to be? I mean, the 1 of 3.
Those are low odds.
And for me, I'm more willing to take a 1 of 3 shot on an asset that is more uncertain, like at the running back position, like in a running back committee, for example. I'm more willing to take a shot on a Raheem Mostert in 2023 in the 13th or 14th round, right? Those are when you want to take those shots, but not for guys that you know you're going to have to consistently start every single week in your fantasy league because of where you drafted them.
True.
Next guy.
All right, let's talk about Isaiah Pacheco. So this is a guy, when you're looking at last year, it's like, okay, he was drafted really low. He came to an Andy Reid team. He overachieved, and he had a really good season last year, and you saw what he was capable of. And I would agree with that. We did see what Isaiah Pacheco was capable of. How much more is Isaiah Pacheco capable of more, though, than what he did last year? And what I mean last year, he was the running back 15 in PPR leagues. And it's like, okay, yeah, but he missed 3 games. Like, yeah, okay. From a points per game perspective, he was 14th in points per game. So extrapolate that over an entire season, and if everybody was playing healthy last year, Isaiah Pacheco was still a mid running back 2, high to mid running back 2. And he's being drafted right now as a low-end running back 1, as the running back 11 on Underdog Fantasy right now, and somewhere in that range on ESPN and Yahoo, etc. And so you look at that price and you say, what are the odds that he's actually going to perform above that price or at that price? And when I'm looking at guys like, okay, let's count the guys that we're for sure are going to be in front of him. McCaffrey, Bijan, Brees, Gibbs, he was last year even, Taylor, Barkley, Kyron, Derrick Henry, probably ETN. But then you've got guys like Rachaad White, who are being drafted way down here. Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery. All of those guys have running back 1 upside. And probably more upside, in my opinion, than Isaiah Pacheco. Where did Isaiah Pacheco's production come from last year? Let's look at it. Between his first year and his second year, he increased his rushing yards 100 yards, right? So he got 10 more points in fantasy from his rushing yards last year. The biggest bump was he had 30 more receptions. So there you go. That in full point PPR leagues, that's 30 more points, okay? So 10 points from rushing yards, 30 points from receptions. He also had 4 more touchdowns, okay? So then you get an extra 24 points there, right? And then he went from 130 receiving yards to 244 receiving yards, and so again, another 10 points. So most of his most of his points in where it increased year over year came from the receptions and the touchdowns. Okay, cool. The problem with this and what his upside is that when you're looking at his receiving metrics, he was only 22nd in the league in targets last year among running backs. And I think that's good. It's definitely better than the year before. He's 17th in receptions, right? These are all good things. 33rd in route participation. But if that's going to be where Isaiah Pacheco is going to get his production, I think he's a high floor player. But I think when you're drafting him at the running back 11, you're talking about him having a fairly high ceiling as well. And I'm not necessarily sure that his ceiling is going to be that high because, again, the touchdowns were also 24 points. You talk about 30 points came from receptions. So the other equal amount of points where he increased his production came from touchdowns, which are a lot more volatile than receptions. So he went from 5 touchdowns to 9 touchdowns year over year. Does he get 9 touchdowns again? Maybe, probably. I don't know. Look, I think Isaiah Pacheco could easily do what he did last year, but what are the odds he's going to do more than that? I'm not sure that's probably. I'm not sure that's going to happen. But again, there
I
are
see a lot of people going behind him right now that could jump him for sure. So.
And that's where I was going with this. James Cook is a guy I think could jump Isaiah Pacheco. He outproduced him last year, actually. Josh Jacobs theoretically could. Joe Mixon, Rashad White, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, Ramondre Stevenson.
Some of those committee guys too. Like, did you already say James Cook? Did you already say Tony Pollard? Did you already say
Tony Pollard?
Like
Jonathan Brooks, even.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I just think there's guys with higher upside behind him, and I think Isaiah Pacheco is safe, but I think he's safe to draft as running back 15 through 17, not running back 11 in fantasy. So it depends on what price you're getting him at. He is on one of the better offenses in the league, but you are going to have players there that are sharing that backfield with Isaiah Pacheco, and that's part of the reason that I just don't think he's going to get much higher production wise than this. But we'll see. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
So
no, we'll continue the trend here with Najee and Jaylen Warren going in the same offense here, right around the same price because again, not a lot of people know what to do with them. Kind of the same theme here as the Bears receivers. Is this kind of too high of a price for me to be comfortable investing in two different running backs where we don't really know which one is going to be more productive? And guess what? Spoiler alert. Whichever one is more productive, it probably isn't going to be by much. At best, you're probably going to get what you drafted him at, and that's a low-end running back too. And to me, when you're playing fantasy football, gosh, I don't know why I'd take a shot on Najee or Warren when I can take a shot on a running back one in that range. Even a guy like I'm not even high on Zamir White, but I'd rather take a shot on Zamir White before I took a shot on either Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren.
Wow.
Just because we know exactly what we're going to get from the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, and with Arthur Smith coming in too as the offensive coordinator. Like, I think their offense could look better, and that could also mean just more mediocrity at the running back position. Yeah. I mean, we saw Arthur Smith didn't even want to use a talented running back in his offense last year.
Right.
So look, with these two guys going in the same range, I had someone ask me a question a couple days ago about both Warren and Najee, and it was like, which one do you prefer? And I said, at the end of the day, if you were to pick one, I personally would pick Jaylen Warren over Najee Harris because Najee Harris, every time I see him run, it looks like he's running through mud. It's the most painful thing that I've ever seen. Well, it gives me Trent Richardson vibes, honestly.
Ooh.
And I know, big time. That's a Colts sore right there.
Yeah.
A Colts sore, cold.
People are going to stop watching, Ethan.
Look, with these two guys, why would I take a shot on floor when I can take a shot on ceiling in fantasy football? For a ton of DeAndre Swift, Zach Moss, James Conner, Mostert, Pollard, Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary, Tyjae Spears. Heck, Gus Edwards. I don't even like Gus Edwards. But for real, like any of these people, you go down the list. Like every single one of these running backs I mentioned has a better chance at having higher production upside than Warren and Najee. And you're out to win your leagues. You're out to score points. You're not winning leagues by starting both Najee and Warren or one or the other in your flex spotter as your running back two every single week.
All right, and the last guy on this video is going to be C.J. Stroud. When you're looking at where C.J. Stroud's being drafted, he's being drafted as the quarterback 6, which I was asking Nathan. I was like, you know where he finished last year? And Nathan was like, didn't he finish around QB 6, QB 5? He was actually the QB 11 in PPR leagues last year. And this is with, he only threw 23 touchdowns last year, but he had 4,100 yards rookie year. Look, I mean, there is a world where C.J. Stroud gets better and returns on this. But when you're looking at the guys going after him, like Dak Prescott's going 3 spots after him from a QB standpoint, QB 9. Joe Burrow's going as a QB 8. Brock Purdy's the QB 13. Jaden Daniels is even like QB 10 or 11. Like he's got a ton of rushing upside. Kyler's going behind him. And so it's like with CJ Stroud, and CJ Stroud's one of my favorite players, period, in the NFL. So it's nothing against CJ Stroud. It's just the fact that like I'm more comfortable drafting somebody after him at price. And that's just kind of avoiding quarterback in that range anyway. So he's kind of a throw in here as somebody that we were kind of, avoiding in our drafts. But longer video, but it's because when you tell people, when we're scared or we don't want to draft somebody, it's usually good to give a lot of defense. It's usually good to be like, okay, like this is why we're not doing it, because usually we get crapped on for these videos. But again, we're not telling you not to draft these guys. We're just telling you that we're scared because some of these guys we're going to take shots on. But I hope it makes sense why we're being at least tentative in drafting these guys, because they all have some red flags or, some questions about their production that we wanted to address in this video. So do 2 things for us. Like this video and subscribe if you play fantasy football. And make sure, like I said, flockfantasy.com/domain. We're going to have our draft guide coming out very soon. So you're going to want to be over there for that. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you later.